Coming up, Lord Frosty the No Man gave many reasons for standing down from his unelected role as Brexit Secretary, but the true reason was that it eventually dawned on even this harder thinking individual that there was no way to make a success of Brexit. The trouble is, he's not the only harder thinking person out there by far, and the same people who voted for Brexit appear to be the same ones who now have the highest rate of fatality from COVID. Stay tuned for further details. If you enjoy the channel, please like this video, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of new videos twice weekly. Research by Ludovic Phalippou at Oxford University and Betty Wu of Glasgow University suggests a direct correlation between Brexit voting districts of the UK and those with the highest rate of fatalities from COVID-19. Incredibly, Boston, Great Yarmouth, South Holland and Hartlepool have four of the UK's highest fatality rates from the virus and also the biggest share of the vote for Brexit, with all four of these districts voting more than 75% for Leave in 2016. By contrast, the 20 boroughs with the lowest death rates from COVID all voted heavily for Remain. Euronews has reported that the results suggest the same people who were swayed by the arguments in favour of Brexit, in other words, a distrust of political and financial elites and populist rhetoric shared via social media, are also those who are anti-vaxxers, or at least vaccine hesitant, and who have been hostile to, or even not complying with, the rules on lockdowns and mask wearing. One of the researchers said that there's a group of people in the population who just reject any official advice, any mainstream advice, any expert advice, or as Michael Gove famously once said, "We've had enough of experts." And it's that kind of thinking in the general British population that has delivered both Brexit and one of the highest COVID death rates in the world. Take a look at this chart, which plots the top 20 Remain voting districts in the UK and the bottom 20 least Remain voting districts against the number of COVID deaths per thousand population. Quite striking, isn't it? On average, in the 20 most Brexity districts, you have more than a 1 in 300 chance of dying of COVID, whereas in the top Remain voting districts, it's less than 1 in 500, almost half. The researchers said these results should have very important consequences for policy, and that we need to take these people seriously. We need to understand what they say, how they feel, and more importantly, how we counter them and their mindset. Jonathan Berman, author of Anti-Vaxxers: How to Challenge a Misinformed Movement, said the correlation made some sense and found echoes in other areas of the world where populist movements such as Brexit had success in recent years. Recent work in the US, for example, has found a similar crossover between Donald Trump voters and COVID-19 deaths. And I do realise that the very British Brexit was different in many ways to the American flavour of the vote for Trump, but both of these movements had their roots in populism. And what exactly is populism? It's where the general population are convinced by politicians to identify false enemies. In the case of both Trump and the Vote Leave campaign, these enemies were the so-called elite. The experts, the judges, the news media and journalists, the smug middle-class Remainers or American liberals. Allied to this, the anti-vax movement does exactly the same thing. It makes enemies of the experts. The doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, epidemiologists, health boards and virologists, who are all cast as the elite, is dangerous in a very similar way to how Brexit was and is dangerous. We live in dangerous times in post-Brexit Britain, with rational thinking being trumped, to coin a phrase, by emotions and feelings stirred up by our current populist government, who deflect the attention of the electorate away from the mind-blowing levels of Tory corruption, the lack of clarity and leadership over the pandemic, the erosion of our rights to protest, the privatisation of the NHS, the criminalisation of journalism, the appointments of political cronies to positions of power at Ofcom, the Arts Council, the BBC and so on and so forth, and the continuing disastrous fallout from a totally unworkable Brexit. Instead, we're asked to look over there at the boatloads of immigrants, or at the vindictive unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, or the unreasonable French, or activist lawyers, or judges daubed as enemies of the people, or by the Tory rallying cry of a culture war against woke liberals, or the disparagement of the European Court of Human Rights as a way of further eroding our liberties here in Britain. Now they're coming for the government scientists who dare to express opinions that are not in line with current government policy. With Brexit and the UK COVID pandemic disaster, populism is alive and kicking under this government.